Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel and welcome to part 2 of touring USS Wisconsin. My name is Spartan Elite 43 and we're going to start off with some pictures. There's going to be a combination of pictures that I narrate over and the videos that I got on my cell phone of the tour guides. So first we had the sign of the Nauticus Museum, which is what you go through to get to USS Wisconsin. Here we have a nice shot outside the museum. And we're going to showcase in the next shot the most beautiful sight you have ever seen in person. Like, if you are anything to do with Navy or any, like, this is absolutely beautiful. So hopefully you guys are ready. It's going to be a good one, folks.
Four fueling stations on the ship. This is the forward port fueling station. There's a lot of it that isn't here. It would be mounted on the bulkhead around here. When we get to the afterport one, it's fully rigged. If we rig this one, there'd be a tripod coming out of these of the deck and these three attachments, and you wouldn't be able to get by, or you'd have to climb over things to get by here. The only one of the four that you can leave set up without it being a big pain in the neck to get around is the one that we'll see when we get back on the port side aft. Utility boat here, and when you launch a boat, you're typically going under 10 knots, between 5 and 10 knots. And the last thing you want to have happen is that boat to hit in the water and then to get turned sideways. So you always have a sea painter coming off the bow, and it would come up here and probably get attached to one of these attachments over here, so that when the boat is in the water, it's literally being towed by that bow line. It would come up through here. Okay?
5-inch dual-purpose secondaries. A lot bigger up close, not gonna lie. Sorry, I ran out of battery on my GoPro, so I had to change.
Each picture below, they enlisted men that wear the traditional Navy, you could call it Donald Duck uniform. And they come aboard and depart Aft Turret 3. The officers and chief petty officers would come aboard or depart at the forward brow, which would be about a little bit after where we have the brow today. But they coming back and forth in a boat like this. Now there'd be another 22-foot motor whale boat on top of that that would be an emergency boat if we launch, if we have a man overboard or something like that. We basically can carry 4 boats. We carry 0 life rafts, or 0 life boats, I should say. Lots and lots of life rafts. The whole idea is on a Navy ship like this, if the ship is in danger of sinking, probably any lifeboats would be destroyed by then anyway. So the rafts take up a whole lot less space.
When they went out to sea, how many men was on here?
It depends on the era. During World War II, about 2,700. During the Korean War, about 2,000, and during Desert Storm, about 1,500. And it all depended on during World War II, we had 97 barrels of 20mm and 40mm anti-aircraft guns that aren't here anymore. So the crew to man all those guns was almost 1,000 people. When we put the missiles on in place of 4 of these 5-inch 38 gun mounts, we took off 4 or 5-inch 38 gun mounts to make room for the missiles. Missiles require a whole lot less manning than the gun mounts do, and that was the main thing. We also did some reductions in the manning in the turrets because we didn't have anybody shooting back at us, so we didn't rate of fire wasn't as critical as it would have been if we'd had somebody shooting back at us. Okay? Same thing. We talked about the Pelican hooks up on the bow. Well, here's another little Pelican hook. So if we were going to refuel, the refueling ship would shoot over a line that would be smaller than my little finger, and you'd start hauling that, and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger until pretty soon you ended up with a wire rope that's about this big around, but had a ring on the end of it, and that's what would go in here. And that would be the span wire. That would lift this thing up when you tensioned it, and the probe would just come down and slide right into it. A much, much better way than the way we had when I was still on active duty, or when I was still on ships. I retired in '87, but I got off of my last sea duty tour in 1980, so it's been a while since I've been to sea on a Navy ship. Now you can see these things all store right over here on the bulkhead if we took them down, and you'd end up with these things sticking out of the deck. It would be a heck of a trip hazard. So you say to yourself, well, what are we going to do with those? Well, you stick a big bar through that and you unscrew it, and then you turn it over 180 degrees and you put it back in there and screw it back in again, and it would look like that. So the beauty of that is you no longer have a trip hazard, and you don't have to worry about where this piece is the next time you need to dig it. Now, we talked about different colors for things. Well, maybe we didn't talk about different colors for things. Piping systems, I have a lot of, every piping system has different colors. Whenever you have something that's blue, it's fresh water. And I think if it's a light blue, it's potable water, drinking water quality. If it's dark blue, it's feed water quality that you could use in the boilers. And there's a lot of difference. You can get sick by drinking this water, but you can ruin your boilers by putting that water in. So because that has chemicals in it. This is distilled water. But an evaporator can distill water at temperatures way lower because it's under a vacuum, way lower than it takes to kill bacteria. So we can make feed water in port, but we can't make fresh water in port. We can distill 100,000 gallons of water a day from seawater into distilled water that's good enough to go into the boilers. Okay, purple is aviation fuel. That would be JP5, and that could come over with the other fueling modes.
That's kerosene, ain't it?
Huh?
Like kerosene that you would heat your house with?
Yeah, it's a highly distilled. Yeah, it's got a flash point a whole lot higher than gasoline. You aren't going to light the vapor as JP5. I was always an engineer, and you know, you go down to the boiler front. If you haven't been there before, back in the days when smoking was a lot on ships, you'd see the guys in the burners, batting the burners, and he's smoking a cigarette, and they throw the lit cigarette butt into a bucket full of fuel, and you say, whoa. Well, that fuel that fuel will certainly burn, but you got to get it atomized. It's going to put that cigarette butt isn't going to have enough heat to sustain combustion. But it's a little concerning to some people who don't.
That's why you got a jet on your furnace.
That's
sprays
right.
it,
Yeah.
vaporize it.
Yeah, the fuel goes through a sprayer plate at about 350 pounds, so it comes out in a very fine mist. Okay, let's go to protected piece of real estate on the main deck. You can see that if we're going forward, there's a lot of stuff that's blocking any of the bad stuff any of the bad weather from hitting this part of the deck. So if we have a deck cargo, this is where it would be tied down, and you'd use this boom to get it aboard. Now, deck cargoes could consist of an admiral's barge. If we have an admiral on board, we have a place for the captain's gig on the starboard side, but we don't have a place for the admiral's barge. So they put a dolly here, and they use this to put the admiral's boat into it. Typically, there'd be 2 or 3 sedans that might be stored here, and just any kind of deck cargo. we could bring a helicopter aboard if we had one on up here that we could pick it up and put it on here, roll it back to the flight deck. So basically that's why we have all these tie downs here, for tying down any kind of deck cargo we might have. Okay.
All right, so here we have a view from the aft turret. For you guys that aren't maybe aware of the Navy terms, I'm sure there's very few of us, but there's the bow, the stern, or the fore, and the aft. We're on the aft section of the ship, looking at the rear main battery and up into the secondary firing control director, and then up into the main tower in the background. I just like this picture because it's beautiful. You got Norfolk in the background, the beautiful buildings there, so it just puts everything into kind of perspective.
If you were an ensign, you might have you would have a stateroom, but you might have 3 roommates.
Yeah, probably.
I had 4 roommates on the first. I was on the first destroyer I was on.
Nice.
Now the XO station was right on the other side of the bulkhead. The captain's cabin is above. The XO's cabin is 1/4 or less than 1/4 of the size of the captain.
And this is a mess hall.
This is the officer's wardroom. Now, come over here, I can show you from the standpoint of the different groups of people on board.
America's Cup owners, these are not stupid people, they're millionaires. They were hiring professional naval architects to design their racing yachts to make them faster. And the Navy, in its infinite wisdom, thought maybe we should be hiring professional naval architects to design, because we weren't doing this before this. Maybe we should be designing our hulls scientifically with naval architects to make them go through the water faster. And so that is what we did in the 1930s. They got hot and they started doing experimentation with hull forms, and they discovered that it's possible to put the bow at a point where the bow wave is going to destructively interfere with the next big wave train coming off the hull, which is right at the break of the ship. See how the hull widens out right there at #1 gun turret to accommodate the width of that gun turret? Well, there's another wave train. As the ship moves through the water, there's a wave train coming off the bow, and there's another wave train that comes off the break of the ship. There's another one coming off the stern. But what they were trying to do was put the crest of the bow wave, superimpose the crest of the bow wave on the trough of this next wave train coming off the break of the, and by golly, they got it right. And this hull is efficient, and it resulted in this ship going 33 knots. The 2 other so-called fast U.S. battleships, the North Carolinas and the South Dakotas, are 27-knot ships. This is a 33-knot ship. When you build a new class of ship, if it's 1 knot faster than the previous class of ship, you can slap yourself on the back. You've got yourself a successful design. For this ship to be 6 knots faster was absolutely unheard of. The other thing they did was they added another turbine, and I wish that you could come back here when you can see the machinery down there in the engineering plant. Normally, steam goes into a high pressure turbine. It goes in at 600 pounds, comes out at 60 pounds of pressure. Then it goes into a condenser where it's turned back into water, and it goes back into the boiler where it's turned into steam, goes back into that high pressure turbine again. On this ship, they designed a low pressure turbine which does not work like a high pressure turbine. All that steam, all that 60-pound steam that normally would have gone into a condenser and be turned back into water, it went into another turbine which doubled the horsepower of this ship. That low pressure turbine put out 55% of the power of the 2 turbines down there. So there were 2 turbines, each had a shaft that went into a reduction gear, a big bull gear and a reduction gear. And then that was all geared down and went out the propeller shaft. But that low pressure turbine produced more power than the high pressure turbine, more than doubling the horsepower of the ship, resulting in 6 knots more speed, which was just absolutely unheard of. It's a neat machine. It works like a rocket nozzle. You know how a rocket nozzle works? You know how a rocket nozzle has this bell shape? Mm-hmm. It has this typical bell shape. So if you look at a unit length, like a coin, as you go from the top to the bottom of that nozzle, because the nozzle is flanging out, the volume of a unit length is getting bigger, bigger, bigger as you go from the top to the bottom. So the pressure inside there is dropping as you go from the top to the bottom of the rocket nozzle. So any gas that you introduce, low pressure gas that you introduce into the top of that nozzle, it's going to accelerate out the bottom of the nozzle because the pressure is less. That's why we have wind blowing right now. The wind is blowing because, which way is it blowing? I don't see a flag. The wind is blowing this way. It's because the pressure is greater there than it is here. And therefore the wind is blowing from there to there. When's this wind going to stop? When the pressures are equalized. Well, that is how this low pressure turbine works. The liquid fuel rocket system and the rocket nozzle was invented by Robert Goddard in 1928. And that technology found its way into this ship by the 1930s, which resulted in this thing going 6 knots faster than the previous class of the Battleship. There's some magnificent machinery down there in the engineering plant. You're standing on teak. The reason why we're using teak is because it won't burn. If you set fire to it, you can take a blowtorch and you'll charge, but you won't set it on fire. If you blow it up, it doesn't splinter. When we talk about splinters, and in the context of a Navy ship, we're not talking about something that you're pulling out of your fingertip with tweezers. We're talking about a shard of metal or wood flying through the air, at supersonic speed. You don't want to get in front of it. That's a splinter when we're talking about Navy ships. It's naturally rot resistant, it's oily, it's got this coarse grain, so it's not slippery when it's rained on. The primary purpose of using teak, however, is because it's a good thermal insulator. This ship was built to go out into the far western Pacific. It did not have any air conditioning, and it doesn't have any air conditioning now either. I mean, the signs claim that we put air conditioning on this ship in 1980. That is not true. It doesn't work. But on a hot day, when you're in the forward mess deck, which has a teak deck above it, you can tell the difference between the temperature there and when you go into the next compartment after the after mess deck, which has Navy non-skid, which is paint with sand mixed into it. You can tell the difference. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's nice and cool in the forward mess deck with the teak deck, but it is cooler than the after mess deck. That's for sure.
And if you're coming
let's go this way.
All right, so here we've got one of the modernizations of the Iowa classes that it received in the 80s, I believe. This is one of the missile launch systems, and this would have been loaded with either Tomahawk cruise missiles or Harpoon anti-ship missiles. This is actually the forward 4 launchers. There's 2 here in this picture. There's 2 directly behind me, and then there's 2 up on the next there's 4 more up on the next platform. 2 on either side of the ship. And so they're actually pretty cool. They don't look like much when you're looking at them like this when they're closed, but when they're open, as you can see all 4 launch tubes there per box. All right, and this is the opposite side. So this would be the starboard side launchers on the same level as the picture that I just showed you guys. But you can see when they're closed, they look pretty unassuming, right? There's not a whole lot there. All right, so this, I believe, is one of the 5-inch gun directors for the 5-inch secondary guns. So just wanted to showcase this just because it was kind of cool that the secondaries have their own complete separate fire control and all that, which makes sense when you think about it, but a lot of people maybe don't know that. All right, now this is one of my favorite views on the entire ship. Like, just being able to stand up above the front guns and look out over the bow into the city. Like, this was an absolutely beautiful shot. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this tour. I know it's been a little while coming. It took a little bit more work to put this one together. I had to edit a bunch of different clips that are different sizes and all that thing. And now we go from the front to the rear, and you can see out over the rear main battery towards the helicopter pad. You can see that the helicopter pad replaced where the catapult fighters would have been. Now, the interesting thing about the helicopter pad is they actually have thought of everything. If you look at the deck here, you can see that there are 2 different trenches, one right next to the helicopter pad, one directly out in front of us. And what that was for was if there was a crash on deck or something like that, it would actually catch the fuel, hopefully, and keep it from spreading down the length of the deck. So it would go into those trenches and then fall off the sides of the ship rather than continuing down the deck of the ship. Now, this is the aft fire control tower. And the wide parts that you see sticking out with those little lenses that are poking out from them, that is your telescopic rangefinder. They don't actually use those very often. The main rangefinder that you guys probably don't even notice is the little tube that's front and center right up here on top. That is actually your radar. So a lot of people think that the radar is actually the big part. Well, actually the radar is much, much smaller. So hopefully you learned something here. But the telescopic rangefinder, it acts kind of like your eyes do. Okay, without thinking, your brain knows the distance between your eyes. And so anytime you're looking at something, your brain can interpret how far away something is, depth perception. That's exactly the way these work. We know the distance between these 2 points, so we can calculate by the point at which they converge how far away something is. Now, this is an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people will know. The Eagle Globe and Anchor is on this 5-inch gun turret for a reason. There were actually Marines serving aboard the USS Wisconsin, as well as, I'm fairly confident, all of the other Iowa-class battleships. And this is a tradition that's gone on for a very long time. Marines serving aboard Navy ships have to be able to help. There's many reasons for it, but one of the things that they do while they're on board, rather than just work out all the time and stay in shape, is man one of the gun turrets. And they also learn to use some of the 50 cals and stuff on board the ship as well, to make sure that they can help in the event of an emergency. But it is really cool to see them represented with their own turret. They get their own 5-inch gun turret that they would be in charge of manning and maintaining and all of the things that go along with it. And it's just a little tidbit that I thought you guys would find interesting that maybe you guys didn't know about. I know I didn't know about it, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed. This is going to end our tour of the USS Wisconsin, and I know it took a little while to get the part 2 out there, and I apologize, but it does take some time to get everything put together and get all the video, or like the pictures stretched and the videos stretched and rotated right, all the things to try to make this video special. So if you like what I'm doing, punch the like button, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, I will see you in the next video.